Hello, my vibrant friend. Thank you for being here today. I am thrilled to have a special guest today, Dr. Annie Fenn. She is an OBGYN doctor from Jackson, Wyoming, but she is the founder and CEO of Brain Health Kitchen. And we are definitely concerned about our brains when we hit midlife. We start to notice our brains changing with menopause. We start to worry about the future of our brains as we look at our parents and our aunts and uncles. And luckily and thankfully, eating can make a difference in our brain health. So I thought that Dr. Fenn would be a terrific guest today. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, Dr. Fenn, and tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and how you got here.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Heather. This is really great to get to know you a little bit too in your community. So I'm a physician. I'm an MD. I practiced OBGYN for 20 years in Jackson, Wyoming, where I live. And I was, doing all the things that OBGYNs do. I was delivering babies. I was doing a lot of surgery. I was taking care of menopausal women. In fact, that was my focus for the last 8 years of my practice. I stopped delivering babies and I focused just on the menopausal woman. And I learned a lot about brain health then. It's actually where my interest in brain health was sparked. Was sitting across the examining table from a woman who was going through menopause, and all of the cognitive and neurological things were happening that, it was really hard to understand back then. And now we're starting to learn more. So I started becoming interested in brain health, and that wasn't really why I retired from medicine. It was more that I've been doing it for 20 years, and I just really felt like I needed a change. Like I was itching to do something more creative. I've always been a writer. I wanted to write more. I wanted to cook more. So I retired. I retired from my practice, and I ended up going to culinary school. I've always loved to make recipes and cook and share food with people. So that's what I did. And around 2018 was when I started really paying attention to some of the scientific literature that shows that what we eat can protect our brains from all different types of neurodegenerative diseases. So I started teaching classes in brain health nutrition back in, 2013, 2014. And then in 2015 is when my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is an early stage that often goes on to Alzheimer's. And in her case, it did. So when that happened, that was really just sort of a juncture in what I was doing. Instead of just focusing on teaching people how to eat and cook better, I really started to focus on brain health nutrition. And I was really delighted, even back then, to find there's a whole body of research that supports a brain healthy way of eating can actually prevent Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. So that's when I founded the Brain Health Kitchen as a cooking school in 2015. And I've been teaching people how to cook this way and updating the science about it ever since.
Nice. That's beautiful. I appreciate that story. When we start having some brain changes that are normal with menopause, we start to worry that we're actually, starting to have some cognitive decline and dementia, and because that change is very noticeable, right?
Community for a lot of women. Perimenopause is a transition phase that lasts on average 7 years. Mm-hmm. And it really throws women for a loop if it starts in your late 30s. I would have people who had just delivered a baby and was coming in for postpartum, and they would have some brain fog, which is understandable from lack of sleep. But then it continued even when the sleep patterns improved. But late 30s is not too early to be starting perimenopause. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of reasons why, cognitive function and cognitive slips occur. It's multifactorial. It's never just one thing. But the good news is, there's lots of things you can do to make it better.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And even some of the things that are like many women will talk about, and I've noticed this too sometimes, like you're trying to say a word and you just can't quite get it. And even as a doctor, you think, oh, there's a name for that, and it's not good, So some of that is, managing expectations and knowing that some of these things are normal. Some will get better, some will not.
Yeah, word was one of the most common, neurological or cognitive symptoms that women experience when they go through menopause, that's for sure. Again, getting back to sleep, if your sleep is disordered or you're not getting enough sleep, you're not getting enough high quality sleep, then your brain's not really going to function as well, and it's harder to communicate. So that's number one. But there's also like a very specific reason why that happens. And it has to be with the menopause brain. It has a really hard time accessing glucose. Glucose is the number one fuel for the brain. It's how our brain runs. It's like the gasoline in the machine. And women who go through perimenopause and menopause, they go through periods of the day where their estrogen just dipped, like the rug being pulled out from under you. Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who's a neuroscientist who studied this, calls this a bioenergetic crisis. And that's exactly what it feels if you've had it happen to you. It's like you'll be going about your day and then all of a sudden you feel like you need to like literally go to bed and take a nap. Like no energy, right?
Right.
That has to do with the way fluctuating estrogen causes blood sugar, especially glucose, to not be accessed by the brain. And the brain just sort of grinds to a halt. So this gets back to, brain healthy nutrition. My focus is mostly on helping people prevent Alzheimer's and other types of dementia, but it's very pertinent to women going through menopause as well.
Great. Let's talk about what we should be eating. What foods are and other things are helpful at this phase in life and for preventing Alzheimer's.
Oh, sure. So I like to talk about dietary pattern. So diet, you kind of, when we say diet, we all think of some way of eating that we go on for a little while and then we go off of it and go back to what we were eating before. So that's not how it works with brain health nutrition. Brain health nutrition is a way of eating that you adopt to the way you like to eat, what you like to cook, what's your budget, what's your background, what is your proclivity for cooking, eating, all of those things. It really has to fit with who you are because of eating that you figure out for the rest of your life. And there are more than one ways of eating a brain healthy diet. So there are a handful of dietary patterns, and I'll say diet here, and you know that I don't mean it like that.
Yeah. It's hard to have the naming of, because I fall into that same problem. Like, we're not going on a diet to lose weight, but that word just comes up.
So there are more than one brain protective dietary pattern that has been studied in literature. So this is really exciting. Of course, the most famous one is the Mediterranean dietary pattern. It's actually a lifestyle. A lot of what we know about preventing Alzheimer's, for example, comes from the Mediterranean diet studies, showing that it was able to reduce cardiovascular disease to a significant amount. And then when they kept studying it through the lens of brain health, it was found to reduce dementia as well by as much as 30%. So Mediterranean diet, totally legitimate way to eat to protect your heart and your brain. The other brain protective dietary pattern that's probably the most proven to reduce risk, it's called the MIND diet, the MIND diet. Now, this the hybrid of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. The DASH diet is one that was developed to help people reduce hypertension, which is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So this fusion of the two diets came up with 10 brain healthy food groups. And in the original MIND diet study in 2015 by Dr. Martha Claire Morris at Rush University, they were able to show a 53% reduction in developing Alzheimer's in people who followed this dietary pattern most closely.
Wow. That's 53%. I mean, you had me with a 30%, honestly, because none of our medications get anywhere near 30. And to get to 53%, wow. I just want to stop and sit on that for a second for our audience. That's huge.
When this study came out in 2015, it was really one of the things that propelled me forward to focus on brain health nutrition, to create the brain health kitchen, the cooking school, and but only been talking about this music I've done for the last 10 years. Another really cool thing about the MIND diet study, and this was part of the Chicago Health and Aging Project, which is a cohort of people who have been followed in the greater Chicago area for many, many decades for lots of different health reasons. So they're, middle to upper class average Americans, right? Following the standard American diet. And it showed that like just switching a couple different things, like adding more berries, adding more leafy greens, cutting back meat, cutting back on fast food. These are the things that were really impactful. And one of the other things I love about the study is that the people that, they did really well, changing their habits, but they weren't following the MIND diet to the T.
Sure.
Maybe they followed it like half the time. There's a MIND diet score, 14 of them you can do, like you're following the diet perfectly. The people that scored somewhere like 7 or 8, they still had a 35% risk reduction.
Wow.
after 5 years. Now, these are cognitively healthy people going into the study. They had one thing that makes the study stand out is how rigorous they were tested in terms of their cognitive function. Not all studies do that, but Dr. Morris was really a stickler on that. So the Mind Diet study is the basis of what a lot of I teach, of what I teach. And that was in 2015. Since then, there has been so much data. There's another spin-off of the Mediterranean diet called the Green Med diet.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this was just published in 2021 as a dietary and exercise lifestyle intervention. So the Mind Diet showed that much risk reduction just with doing diet. And of course, we know that there are other things to protect your brain, like not smoking and exercising, lifting weights and things like that. So the Green Med study compared the Mediterranean diet, the standard one from, the old pyramid, to one that's actually boosted in polyphenol-rich foods. Now, these phenols are, brain health nutrients and mostly plant foods. And what they did was they added like a handful of walnuts. They added 4 cups of green tea. They added like a green shake a day. And they asked everyone to exercise. And what they found by looking at brain MRI data, so they're actually looking at the structure of the brain at the beginning of the study and then 18 months later to see if it has an effect on brain volume. And as we know, as we get older, the brain actually does shrink a little bit. It's kind of like, losing a 1/4 inch of your height, as you get older. It's a little bit inevitable, but the name of the game is to hold on to as much brain volume as you can, because brain volume is losing brain volume is indicative of poor brain health and cognitive health. So anyways, in this Green Med study, what they showed was that people had more robust brain volume in this boosted diet, this Mediterranean diet boosted with polyphenol-rich foods, even more than the traditional Mediterranean diet.
Wow, that's amazing. I love what you said too about how people's, when their score was like, they did it kind of most of the time, they still had a good outcome, still a good risk reduction, because we very much live in a culture where it's like, well, I'm on this, I'm off this, I'm totally doing it perfectly. I'm beating myself up because I didn't do well this one afternoon or this one meal. And we can put that out the window. We don't need it. If today didn't go well, then do something tonight. Plan tomorrow when you're going to eat your berries, or, there's ways to improve, but there's ways to just kind of keep going.
It's true. And, the way the Mind Diet guidelines were created, we can go into those in more detail if you like, is what you consume in a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Daily basis. Yeah. And people getting started on brain health nutrition, I think this is a really important point. What you do in a day is not going to matter. What you're going to do twice a week may not matter. But what your habits on a weekly basis are going to matter. Like, are you doing resistance training at least twice a week? Are you getting your heart rate up at least 30 minutes most days? Doing stuff like that most days is what matters. It's the same with getting the brain healthy food groups in.
Nice. Well, let's talk about the food. Tell us more about what we should have in our week, please.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you the Brain Health Food Pyramid from my book. My book came out last year called Brain Health Kitchen, Preventing Alzheimer's Through Food. And it's a cookbook. It has 100 recipes, but there's also a lot of science in it. Okay. So you can understand, why we want you to eat certain things. And so this is a snapshot diagram of, what does brain healthy eating look like in the course of a week? And not married to any one study or one dietary pattern. It's basically a synopsis of all the science that we've been talking about, plus a lot more, like the importance of fermented foods. A big study came out of Stanford years ago looking at the gut microbiome. We also have studies on vegetarians and vegans and what are the brain health advantages of being completely plant-based. So all of that is in here. And what you'll notice is there are 10 brain healthy food groups, and most of them are plant-based.
And for people who are not watching on YouTube, if you're listening, if you go to Instagram to Brain Health Kitchen, you can see this. There are postings there with the pyramid there.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just posted today about the pyramid, which I haven't done since the book came out last year. So the 10 brain healthy food groups, I'll just go through them really quickly, and then we can in more detail if you want. The first one is vegetables. Second one is leafy green. Third one is whole grain. Then berries, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, fish and seafood, meat, poultry, and eggs, and extra virgin olive oil.
Nice.
Now, there are a couple of other things on the pyramid as well. I put a rung on the pyramid for fermented food as a nod to the Stanford study, as well as all we've learned about the gut microbiome and how to eat to cultivate a healthy gut is very pertinent to brain health nutrition. Because the more we learn about the brain, we know that it's the trillions of microbiota in the gut that's really driving our brain health. So that is reflected in here as well.
Great.
So it's the Mediterranean diet pyramid. So I took off the red wine, which is a prominent part of not only the Mediterranean diet pyramid, but the Mind diet guidelines as well. And that's based on studies that came out just last year and the year before, looking at the amount of alcohol that seems to have a detrimental effect on the brain. We no longer consider drinking moderately to be a positive factor for your brain health.
Right. And we'll continue to hear more about that, but it's important to note that. And I think people are changing their behavior based on those studies. So I think that's terrific.
Yeah, I hope so too. But on a plus side, coffee and tea is on my brain food pyramid because there's ample data to show that drinking coffee and tea have a lot of brain health nutrients, especially polyphenols, that do specific functions in terms of blocking oxidative stress, helping with memory, helping consolidate memory, basically reducing the aging of the brain.
Nice. And I hear people at midlife, and I don't understand it, who say, oh, I wish I didn't drink coffee. And I tell them, I don't. Why would you wish that?
Most people don't realize that coffee is probably one of the most nutrient-dense things that is commonly consumed in our culture. But this is how people get it wrong with coffee, especially in the United States, is we put too much junk in our coffee. We take this polyphenol-rich drink that also has fiber. It has been proven to reduce dementia risk. And we add sugar, honey, or agave, or syrups. We add dairy products that have saturated fat. We know that a brain healthy diet is actually very low in saturated fat. So dumping things like that into your coffee is not really good for your brain health.
Gotcha. Well, tell us about how much of these things should we have in a week? Like greens, how often do you recommend greens in a week?
So I recommend 2 servings of leafy greens a day. Some of these do daily recommendations and some have weekly recommendations.
Okay, let's go through them. We've got time.
So for the vegetable group, my guidelines differ slightly from the Mind diet and Mediterranean guidelines because I'm factoring in all the science that we need more flavonoids and more fiber in our diet. Okay. This is how you get them. So instead of just 1 serving of vegetables a day, which you might have heard before, I'm recommending 3 servings of vegetables a day. Now, when you think of serving of vegetables, it's really not that much. It's 1 cup of raw vegetables or 1/2 cup cooked.
Okay, great.
Really not that much vegetable. And I think that, it's really important to have a wide variety of vegetables that you eat. And I call out 3 different types of vegetables as being the most nutrient dense to look for. One group is the cruciferous vegetables. These are the broccolis and the Brussels sprouts and the cauliflowers. They contain sulforaphane, which is a really important antioxidant for brain health and, overall health. The second one is colorful vegetables. Carrots and beets and all the different colors that you see at the supermarket are really important because the pigment in plant foods is actually a nutrient called flavonoids. And there's a lot of data to show that a flavonoid-rich diet reduces Alzheimer's risk, just like the Mind diet. Flavonoid-rich foods reduce Alzheimer's risk by about 50%. Wow. So I want you to go with colorful vegetables. And then I made the executive decision of calling mushrooms an honorary vegetable.
Okay.
There are a lot of new studies looking at mushroom eating cultures having less dementia as they get older. And the recommendation for mushroom intake is just 2 servings a week. And that's 2 half-cup serving, a half-cup cooked. It's a very small portion of mushrooms a week.
Yeah. So just when you're looking at what you're going to make for dinner this week, think of recipes that may have mushrooms for at least one of the meals, right?
Absolutely. So vegetables every day in 1 or more meals a day. A really good tip I find to get my vegetables in is I like to start with vegetables in the morning. Instead of just scrambling an egg and eating with a tortilla or something for breakfast, I'll throw in some leftover vegetables. And one good way to kind of start off on the right foot.
Nice.
Vegetables are clear.
Yep.
Leafy greens is considered a separate food group outside of it. And that comes to the MIND diet because there's all this data on just leafy greens, like people that eat one salad a day, they have more brain volume than someone who doesn't eat salad very often. There's MRI data on this for many, many years, showing that leafy greens have a particular type of flavonoid that's really good for our brain. So the recommendation based on my guidelines are 2 servings a day.
Okay.
Serving is 1 cup raw or 1/2 cup cooked. So leafy greens every day. If you're going to have a salad, have a big salad. You don't always have to eat them raw, so there's not so much chewing involved. I love sauteed arugula. I love sauteed spinach. I love sauteed Swiss chard and kale. I'll even buy like a box of baby kale that's already been washed and buy the handful right out of the box and put it in the frying pan or into a salad. Just really, really easy to get these greens in. Probably one of the most important things you can do for your brain health.
Great. Nice.
And then the next one is a surprising one for some people. It's whole grains. I know we're kind of coming out of that era, thank goodness, that people think that grains are bad for their brain.
Right.
Someone was going gluten-free even though they didn't have celiac disease or an allergy.
Right. And actually get more processed grains.
Yeah,
we have that in our family with a lot of very processed grains.
Very less of that. I mean, just to, clear the air on gluten. I mean, 5% of people should avoid gluten because either they have celiac disease or they have a sensitivity or an allergy. So that's really less than 4 or 5% of the population. For everyone else, avoiding gluten really does nothing for you but restrict your diet. Whole grains have been very proven to be an important component in a brain healthy diet. So the recommendation for whole grains is 3 servings a day.
Okay.
Yeah, and the serving size is small. It's really small. It's like a 1/2 cup of cooked quinoa or 1/2 cup of, say black rice. It could be 1 piece of whole grain toast.
Sure.
It could be like a little scoop of bulgur that you throw in your salad. It could be whole grain pasta that you have with your lunch or your dinner. It's a small serving, but 3 times a day is the recommendation.
Okay. And then berries, my favorite.
Yeah, berries is also my favorite. Berries is an easy one because I don't know anyone who doesn't like berries. It's more just that you have to think of it. And if you understand and know that there's more science behind berries than any other food in terms of preventing Alzheimer's, then it's easy to remember, right? So the recommendation for berries in my guidelines is 1 serving a day. And a serving size is about 1/2 cup.
Okay. Great.
Now
And that's fine if you're at a time of year where you can't get it fresh where you live?
Absolutely. Yeah, frozen is fine. One of my favorite supermarket ingredients is frozen wild blueberries.
Nice.
Now, most of the flavonoids, which are called anthocyanins in berries, is in the skin, the peel of the berry. So berries that are smaller have a greater skin to pulp ratio, like wild blueberries. They really are better for you. They really do have 30% more of these anthocyanins than a regular blueberry. So the small tart berries are actually especially good for you. But I would say, any berry that is blue, purple, red, black, these are the most nutrient-dense berries.
Nice. Great. Okay, what's next?
Next is beans and legumes. This is one of those food groups you think about on a weekly basis. The recommendations are 2 to 3 servings per week. The serving size is really small. It's just 1/2 cup cooked.
Okay.
You can use canned beans. You can cook them from scratch. You can eat hummus. That would be a serving of beans. You have like a 1/2 cup of hummus maybe. And there's lots of different ways to get beans and legumes. I really like lentil. I think of them as like the fast food of the legume world. You can take lentils that are dry, cook them from scratch, boil them for 20 minutes, and they're done. I especially like black beluga lentils, if you want to seek those out, because the pigment in the black lentils is actually one of these flavonoids, these brain health nutrients we've been talking about.
Oh, okay.
So all the lentils, that whole berry or beans are actually really good from a brain health perspective.
Great.
Yeah. And then next is nuts and seeds. It's long been known that nuts are an important food group for preventing heart disease and then brain health problems. The recommendation goes straight from MIND diet guidelines, 4 servings a week, up to 4 or more. Yeah. So I added seed to make it sort of like a bonus food group because some people are allergic to nuts, but you can access the exact same brain health nutrition in seeds And seeds are so good for you. They also add a lot of protein to the diet, which we're finding that as adults age, it is so important to get enough protein so that we're aging without frailty. So they're aging with our muscle mass intact. So I do like to pay attention to protein recommendations as well.
Yeah.
And that can help you reach that. Like almonds are really high in protein. Hemp seeds are one of my favorite seeds.
Mm-hmm.
They blend really nicely into a smoothie. And a quarter cup of hemp seeds gives you 10 grams of protein. So a sprinkle here and there on your yogurt or on your oatmeal or in your smoothie really adds up to a good protein boost.
Nice. I'm actually pleased that it's not that this is listed as weekly and not daily, because I work with a lot of people who overeat nuts and seeds, honestly. They use it for their boredom eating and they use it for their emotional eating because they say, well, it's healthy. So I just, when I'm not hungry and I'm having a bad feeling, I go and I eat the walnuts. And I literally have many professional women I've worked with who say now there are bags of nuts in my cupboard that now that I don't have them 3 times a day, I just want to point that out because I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go crazy on the nuts 4 times a week. They are. And anything that just
much of that calories with brain healthy eating, because honestly, if you're following a mostly plant-based diet like we're talking about that has a lot of fiber, it's almost impossible to overeat.
Right.
Most people will actually find that they can maintain a healthy weight more easily if they follow these guidelines. But there are serving size guidelines. And there's a reason for that, because you don't want much energy dense food. So the serving of nuts is a quarter cup.
So if you're snacking on that and getting a cup or more a day, that's probably too much for your health, even though it's a healthy food. Like we shouldn't, I guess one thing I try to teach people is we don't want to overeat healthy foods either. We want to eat as much as we need to nourish ourselves, but nothing is supposed to be overeaten.
And also it kind of speaks to the diversity of the diet. There's not one food here that is like the thing that's going to help you keep from getting Alzheimer's or cure your brain fog at menopause. There's not one thing. It's really a system, and it's based on diversity. It's based on choosing foods from lots of different food groups. I mean, if you're at a healthy weight and you like to eat like gobs and gobs of nuts, it's probably not that big of a deal if it's not affecting your weight. But, nuts are really satiating and filling. So if you're overeating one food group, then you're pushing another one off the plate.
Right.
And I want people to eat all the meat.
Yeah.
The system is really important.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Next we have fish, right?
Fish and seafood. This is a really important brain health food group. Really important. There's been many individual studies on how people age with a healthy brain, whether or not they get Alzheimer's or other types of dementia, and whether or not they eat fish. And in the Mediterranean dietary pattern, the recommendations are 2 to 3 servings a week of fish and seafood. Of course, it's more prevalent in those countries to be able to access high quality fish and seafood. In the MIND diet, interestingly, they didn't find any more improvement in brain health in terms of Alzheimer's reduction over 1 fish and seafood meal a week.
Okay. Nice.
Interesting. So I'm leaving it kind of open for people in my guidelines. If you really enjoy fish and seafood, up to 3 servings a week is totally fine. It's a great source of lean protein. It's preferable to other types of animal protein, and it gives you a lot of omega-3 fatty acids that are very important, like DHA and EPA. But if you're someone who finds it really hard to get fish and seafood, either it's not accessible or it's expensive or you just don't love it that much, then 1 serving a week in the MIND diet was shown to be beneficial for protection.
Great. Nice.
And if you're vegetarian or vegan and you don't eat any seafood at all, the way this pyramid is designed is you can eliminate that rung of the pyramid.
Okay.
There would be a compelling argument to supplement with DHA and EPA because they are such important brain health nutrients. So I would definitely want you to have a discussion with your physician or nutritionist about the pros and cons of taking a supplement for that if you don't eat any fish and seafood. But you only eliminate that whole food group and access brain health nutrition from everything else.
Okay. We have a few left, and you've been so generous with your time. But we've got 3 groups left, and I know that your time is getting short, so I'm going to let you manage your time on these last 3.
You can go through these real quickly. Fermented food. I just want people to think about fermented foods. They've been shown to jumpstart a healthy, diverse gut microbiome. A fermented food could be the serving of kimchi or sauerkraut or lacto-fermented vegetable. It could be miso paste, which I love to cook with. or kefir or yogurt. I tend to eat yogurt probably 3 or 4 days a week, and that's my fermented food of choice. So fermented food can be really important to start introducing that into your diet if you haven't already. I do include poultry, meat, and eggs on my brain health pyramid. And I have a whole chapter that goes into, how do you choose animal products that are better for the planet? They're more sustainable, they're more ethical. And how do you cook them without creating too much saturated fat? Like I mentioned, these food groups, dairy products, chicken, red meat, are a huge source of saturated fat, especially in the American diet. So most Americans probably put this food group at the bottom of the pyramid. It's what they eat mostly. And we need to stop that thinking. So I'm recommending limiting animal products from this group to less than 4 servings a week total.
Okay. Great.
So a lot of your meals in this brain healthy way of eating are plant-based, or they might have a small serving of chicken that you've very carefully cooked that is a much smaller portion than what you're used to seeing in the typical American diet. And then the very top of my pyramid is sweet, because I wouldn't want to, eat without having like treats and sweets. And my one rule of thumb when you're having cookies or cake or bars or, things like that are, fun to eat and sweet, is that there has to be a lot of fiber. Whenever there's sugar in the food, there has to be fiber so that it's more slowly absorbable. Because we know that metabolic health is very important for brain health. Everything you can do to reduce the risk of diabetes or prediabetes or ending up with too much weight around your middle, all of those things that lead to diabetes later in life have to do with, in part from getting too much sugar that's not balanced by fiber.
Right. Nice. And then you have
olive oil really quickly. Extra virgin olive oil is the primary cooking oil in all these brain protective dietary patterns. Extra virgin olive oil is what I use 90% of the time in my kitchen. If I'm using something to heat something like searing in a pan or frying, which honestly I mostly don't do because it's not a brain healthy cooking method, I would use an oil with a higher smoke point like avocado or pecan.
Okay. Great. Well, you have a book too, and that's also, people can see pictures of it on your Instagram feed, but the name of it, please remind our audience. And
it's called The Brain Health Kitchen, Preventing Alzheimer's Through Food. I also have a newsletter called The Brain Health Kitchen, and you can access that at brainhealthkitchen.substack.com. And there I'm writing once or twice a week about the latest studies that are coming out. I'm still creating recipes based on brain healthy nutrition. I'm creating downloadable guides that people can print out and take to the supermarket with them. Just trying to make the book and all the science accessible on a daily basis. So we have a big community over there of food-loving brain health enthusiasts. And it's you sign up for it. There's a free subscription. There's a paid subscription. So I'd love for anyone who's interested in this topic to join me over there. And then I'm on Instagram at Brain Health Kitchen, where I pop in to do some educational things. And I take people on brain health retreats around the world. I just got back from Italy where I did a retreat in Puglia. I'm going back to Sicily in October for a week-long brain health retreat. And these are educational vacations. These are culinary tours with a brain health focus. So we have a lot of fun on these tours. We're not really sitting around talking about dementia or anything like that. We're really looking at the way like Mediterranean people live and how they move and what their meals are like and how can we take some of that back home and really that level of health and vitality in our own lives.
Nice. Well, I will make sure that all of your information is in the show notes as well, so people can click in and just see that there as well. But thank you so much, Dr. Fenn, for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been really wonderful to talk about the brain healthy food groups and learn what you're up to as well.
That's great. Thanks. And thanks for our listeners today for being here with us.